All right. Hello, last season lads. Welcome to Coaching and a Cup of Tea with Mummabear. I have a very special guest here today. I've never had anybody on the podcast who is an expert in the way she is about gut health. She is the queen of it, and I'm completely obsessed with her and so excited she's here. Rachel, would you introduce yourself to the amazing listeners on the podcast?
Yeah, and Coach Mummabear, it is an honor to be on your podcast here today. You are just a ball of joy, and I'm excited to talk all things gut health because I truly believe, our health really is the foundation for our success. Whether we're a mama, whether we're an entrepreneur and a mama, which is, I know a lot of you ladies who are listening to this podcast. But a little background about myself. I am a functional medicine dietitian. Not a lot of people know what that is, but functional medicine essentially means root cause. So I help people get to the root cause of their chronic health issues, whether that's hormonal imbalances, thyroid issues, gut issues, and heal instead of just deal and reach their optimal level of health. Essentially put, but instead of using medication, when you hear medicine, you tend to think medicine. It's more of a lifestyle-based approach. So holistic, mind and body. I always ask the question, why do we have this problem in the first place? And what do we need to do to restore function? And when we really dive into it, very often it's our diet. It's our chronic stress. It's, the way we show up for ourselves and our own self-care and the belief systems that we carry. And sometimes there's environmental things. We get sick. There's, gut bugs and things we can pick up. But for most of the time, it really comes down to the way we've been taking care of ourselves. And when we can get the mind and the body right, the rest does follow. So functional medicine's my baby. Gut health is really the core of health, I believe, because everything is connected to our gut. And I know we'll dive into that a little bit more extensively here in a little bit. On top of that, I run a functional medicine nutrition practice with a team of dietitians. So I'm an entrepreneur myself. I'm a woman on the go, running a business, speaking, podcasting, doing all the good stuff, and actually in the process of starting up 2 other businesses here. So like I said, we got on today, we're like, we can go in any direction, on what we want to talk about.
Well, we're very lucky to have you. And I'm so excited that we managed to sort it out. And that's exactly right. I come on, she's like, I was just recording for my new business. And I'm like, once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur. And most of our listeners are entrepreneurs. So I just feel like this is so important because sometimes when we get really busy and it's very easy for this stuff to always feel secondary. And your opinion is no, let's flip it around, right? Has it always been like that for you? Or was this something that happened because of something in your life?
Yeah, that's a great question. Entrepreneurs, I really believe our business will never outgrow our own level of personal development. And what is the greatest form of personal development that we truly have? That is our health, our fitness. Fitness is the gateway drug to personal development, at its core. And no, I will say for me, I haven't always put that piece first, and I'll explain why. I actually got more on the extreme side of fitness. So I had fitness for me is a lot of my therapy in my life. I grew up, girl, in a very messed up home. I'm not sure if we're allowed to swear on this podcast, but
we are allowed to swear on this podcast. I grew up whatever we want.
I grew up in a really fucked up environment as a kid, a lot of neglect. A lot of uncertainty, and that really plays a role in someone's personal development. So I had to learn to really take care of myself at an early age. But fitness, athletics for me was really at the core of my escape. I was a gymnast and I was a dancer, and it's where I felt like I had some kind of control ultimately in my life. And I was able to develop this level of discipline that gave me a sense of worth ultimately in my life. But I ate like shit. I grew up on McDonald's, stored Halloween candy, fast food. But fitness was really that starting point for me. So when I went off to college at Baylor University, I decided I wanted to study nutrition and dietetics. I was like, well, maybe there's something to this. If I combine the nutrition component with the fitness component, maybe I could actually perform a lot better. I could have more confidence, because that was something that I really, really suffered quite a bit with, was that confidence piece. So I went off to college and started studying nutrition and dietetics, got out of gymnastics and dance. And this is when I actually picked up weightlifting. And that is where the fitness freak that most people see today, like, really changed life. I became known as Rachel Scheer.
By the way, I love it. And I show my boys, my kids, you lifting the big weights. And I'm like, that will be mama one day. And they're like, relax, mom. But I'm like, look at her. She's doing it.
Hey, girl, though, you have no idea. Like, this is a tamed down version of like what it was when I was in college. My personality type, I'm very type A. I do things to the extreme, almost to a fault. With kind of having some more of that perfectionism. And I'll talk a little bit about this here in a little bit, because that's been my blessing in business and building things. But ultimately, it's been a double-edged sword very often in my life. But anywho, I got into weightlifting, fell in love with it, because it really helped me cultivate that confidence in myself that I felt like I never really had. And I was really good at it too. And that's where I got into bodybuilding and competing. I got on the cover of different magazines because I just wanted to become an influence for other people. I wanted to become a fitness influencer. So I made up my mind that was something that I wanted to do when I was in college. And I really did it. And it was beautiful and it was awesome. And it was to a point where it eventually began to grow into something that was no longer really honestly good for me anymore. What started off as a very healthy venture for just confidence and wanting to feel good about myself and, female empowerment and strength and all of that stuff that I, still am a big believer in today, grew into this unworthiness of pushing myself further and further, feeling like I had to look a certain way in order to honestly feel like I had worth by, and I don't even know who, but at the core, it was really myself at the time, looking back. And it was about 3 years into competing in bodybuilding, I ended up with a ton of health issues. I ended up with gut issues, chronically bloated to the point where I looked 6 months pregnant every single day. I had my hair falling out, my skin was a wreck. I went to the doctor, they did every standard blood test, scans, all of that. And I was just given medications every single time. I was given birth control for my hormones because I had no cycle anymore. I was given thyroid medication, laxatives because I could no longer use the restroom. And I just continued to get worse and worse. Now, at the time, I hadn't really looked at that lifestyle component. I just was like, what is going on? Medicine, figure it out for me, get to the root cause of it, right? Mm-hmm. And I was blown away why no one could figure out what was really going on. They're like, hey, you have constipation. Hey, you have no hormones. And here's all these Band-Aids addressing what was going on. And now I'm at the point where I'm severely depressed, can barely get out of bed anymore. And of course, my business, my life, my relationships, and everything is affected as a byproduct of this. And I'm just at my rock bottom. At least I thought I was at my rock bottom, because shortly thereafter, I was actually sent to a colorectal surgeon who wanted to then cut out my entire large intestine because of how severe my gut issues were, where the motility in my gut literally came to a halt, where I couldn't use the restroom anymore at all without an enema. Not sure if you guys know what that is, but it's like this saline water you inject into your booty. It's funny how I won't say ass, but I'll say booty. But I'll say the
word, but not the A word. We're not that.
We pick and choose. But that was the only way, literally, I could use the restroom anymore. So I became sick and fed up with Western medicine. And I wanted a different approach. And that's what really catapulted me into learning so much about functional medicine and really honestly about gut health, right? Because all of my issues were stemming from my gut. As I dove into doing microbiome testing and looking at the bacteria, I found out I had intestinal permeability, which is where our gut lining becomes weakened and broken down with food, bacteria, and toxins leaking into your bloodstream, stimulating immune inflammatory responses, affecting your mental health. I had, from a metabolic standpoint, hypothyroidism, but due to the training and the low calorie diet that I was following at the time, I had no menstrual cycle because of that on top of it. And I had a ton of bacteria overgrowth in my gut because of my dietary choices and just the lifestyle that I was living. So I started to put all of these puzzle pieces together and really dive into doing the work. And I can dive into a little bit here what that consisted of. But at the core, I had to really get clear on where all of these issues were coming from in the first place. And a big part of that was really stemming from, this core unworthiness that I had, with myself at the time. Like I was trying to, at the core, shame myself to health and fit, which is so backward. And the reality is this, we can't shame ourselves to health and we can't heal.
That really stuck out to me when you said that. So for our listeners, I met Rachel in Texas a couple months ago and got to hear her speak. And you actually said that, and I wrote it down and I put it on a Post-it because it's just so common in the women I work with, right? Like the shaming to health. And I love that you talk about it in that way. Like, that's not the way, lassies. We're going to do it somewhere. We're going to do it differently. And Rachel has a way to do it differently.
Yeah, we can't shame ourselves to health and we can't heal a body we don't love. And that's really that core place of where we're coming from. And I see this on both ends of the spectrum. Entrepreneurs, I feel like they can very much fall into that type A perfectionist, coming from a very similar place, like where I was. It doesn't matter if it was fitness or their business, we can change the avenue, but very often that root cause is the same. And it manifests in what? Health issues, exhaustion, burnout. And I see this all the time. Or we see the other end of the spectrum too, where this could be the person who's overweight, unhealthy, depressed, constantly making excuses for why they should eat, a lot of the shitty standard American food that is wreaking havoc on their body, and have the mindset of like, hey, this is self-love, I'm just choosing to enjoy life. But really at the core, it's still coming from a place of, I don't believe I'm worthy of having not only like the health, the fitness, and the body, but the life that I truly say I want for myself. So when we really dive into the root cause, I see with a lot of people, it comes from either end of the spectrum, maybe the extreme side, or maybe the side where it's like, we're not doing the things we know we should be doing because there's this underlying core belief of, I don't really believe that I'm worthy of it. And if we think about, America and all of the health issues, like chronically obese, metabolic issues, like those are the number one, like leading causes of death, and it's because we are really choosing these addictions of running away from something at the core. Like food is the number one most abused.
Alcohol. That was alcohol.
Anxiety, all of that.
Like, and wonder why the next day feel absolutely awful, depressed, the world is going to end. And, by the time it's metabolized by the end of the night, let me just do it again, right? And it's the cycle. And
yeah, so I really believe when we can get down to the root, which is, how we really feel about ourselves and where is that coming from, but also looking at the lifestyle. Like for me, I was training way too hard, but it was coming from that core place. I was choosing to eat foods that didn't love my body back. Even though I was lean and healthy, internally, I was empty, and I was eating foods that were wreaking havoc on my gut microbiome and my mental health at the time. So I had these physical, emotional, dietary stress, and that's where really this ease, an imbalance in the body really starts to become. So, to answer your question, I really believe, one, that, our health is the greatest form of personal development. And health goes beyond just, eat less, work out more, being at a healthy body composition, although that is an extension of it. It is so much more than just that. It is the way that we truly feel about ourselves. It's how we show up for ourselves, how we take care of ourselves. Self-love is choosing to eat foods that love me back. It's choosing to move my body because I love my body, because I feel like a freaking badass every time I'm in that gym, not because I'm punishing myself. It is choosing to show up as the best version of ourselves, because when we're able to do that, we are able to then grow our business, show up for our family, show up for the people around us in the way that we want to.
In an energetic way, right? Like that's the other thing. Like I get up and I work out at like 5 a.m. because I have 4 little kids, and around about 6:30, it is mom mode until they're dropped off at school, and then it's work mode. And what I found was I was getting off the beam when I wasn't able to do the workout first thing in the morning, because then life gets crazy and busy. But it's like, no, that's like a treat for me. Like doesn't feel like a punishment anymore. It used to, but it doesn't anymore. And I think that's the other part of this work. Like if you're sitting here thinking, oh, I'm never going to be like Rachel and love going to the gym and love working out or love eating healthy, I think I just want to say to those people, like, that can shift, that can change. That's what having a coach like you is all about. Like, it is not about shaming you to help. It's about empowering you to help.
100%. That's exactly, what, and I love the fact that you say, like, that is my me time. And mamas, especially, are notorious for putting everybody right in their life first. I'm going to put my family, I'm going to put my kids, I'm going to put, even work, and as a byproduct, they're overweight, unhealthy, depressed, and yet wondering why they're struggling so much with building a business and feeling good and having the energy that they want to, but they're trying to do it from an empty cup. And, I know that's a saying we hear all the time, but we can't pour from an empty cup. We truly can't. And I believe the most important relationship we have outside of, the relationship we have with God, I think that's number one. Number two really is the relationship that we have with ourselves. That relationship we have with ourselves. And if you think about it, that is really time not only connecting and getting to know ourselves, but it is also that health side. Like our body is a temple, and taking care of that. That is really that core formula that's going to allow us to do everything we ultimately want in life with ease. That's the goal, right? So we can try to force our way, right? Like I did to fitness, and look at what the root causes were and look what it manifests in. We can try to force our way in our business and relationships or whatever it may be. But every time we force, there's an opposite reaction. The goal is really to be able to come at these things with ease, where it flows naturally. Not saying it's ever not going to be hard and running through difficulties, but it's really a byproduct of who we are and how we're showing up on a day-to-day basis. And I truly believe we cannot do that if we are not mentally and physically where we ultimately need to be.
I love it. I was at church with my kids last night. They're, preparing for First Holy Communion, my twins. And I was just thinking about how you said, the most important relationship for you is yours with God and then to self. But, the other side of that coin is, if I don't have a decent relationship with myself, Rachel, guess what relationship also suffers? My relationship with God suffers, because then guess what? I don't have the energy, quote unquote, to go to church on Sunday. I don't have the energy, quote unquote, to take my kids till 8:30 at night, all 4 of them, to, a family faith dinner and all these other things, right? It's like, whenever I think about what I'm doing with the health piece, it's like, it allows me the energy I need to do the things I want to do. Otherwise, listen, I love being in my pajamas at 8:00 also, right? And reading my book on the sofa. But a lot of the time that's not available. And the biggest thing that has come from me from doing the type of work you're talking about is the energy to do the things I want to do.
Exactly. 100%. And that's where, I use the word fitness. Fitness is the gateway drug to personal development, but I'm not just talking about going to the gym and throwing around a bunch of weights. It's having a fit mind, body, and heart. Ultimately, that's what really fitness is at the core. And we need to spend time with ourselves. If you want to have a great relationship, right, with your husband, you can't not ever spend time with him. Same thing with your kids. So we wonder why we struggle so much with ourselves and how we feel about ourselves and our confidence. But at the core, we really actually spending time for ourselves and investing time into us through, getting to know who we are, through fitness, through health, through all of those different avenues, because there's so many different avenues available. And that's why, fitness for me isn't just black and white. It's those three areas: fit, heart, mind, and body, ultimately at the core. And, you're completely right when you say that, hey, I know that if this isn't right, nothing else is going to be right ultimately in my life, right?
And like you said, it just makes everything feel harder, right? Like what you're trying to get across to your clients is we can do this, and it will be a struggle perhaps in the beginning, but it will come with ease as you go. And then the other things will be easier.
Yeah. So anytime we make a change ultimately in our life, it feels difficult at first because we do something for some kind of a benefit. You can even look at somebody who smokes cigarettes, right? Yeah. And there's a benefit they're getting. They're getting an immediate benefit. They get to relax. They kind of get that anxiety lifted from them. And they may know at the core, like, hey, cigarettes are not good for me, but they're getting some kind of a benefit. So as humans, we follow pleasure and we run away from pain. So when we view something like working out as a pain point, it's going to be really hard to get ourselves to want to go and work out, because we can have the viewpoint of, right, when I go to the gym, I'm sore, I have to wake up earlier, loss of time spent in my own morning routine, loss of sleep. Sometimes there's that self-judgment piece we get when we're just getting started and we're looking at ourselves in the mirror at the gym. So we can find all those pain points, right? And the pleasure point can seem far away. How change really actually occurs is when we have a massive immediate pleasure, and by not doing it, there's actually a massive immediate pain point. And what I mean by that is, why I go work out every single day is because it's my therapy. It's not because of I'm trying to get to a certain body composition or a goal weight. That's what a lot of people's goals are, and perfectly fine. And that can be there, but that can't be the reason why you're getting up every single day and getting your ass in the gym. There has to be an immediate reason now as to why we're doing it. And if I don't, the immediate reason as to what it's going to take away for me, I feel anxious, I feel depressed constantly throughout the day. So when I don't work out, there's an immediate pain point. And there's an immediate pleasure point that I get. And also I see the more I do it, right, I'm like, oh, hey, you know what? I am feeling more confident. I am feeling better. Right before I did this podcast and I was like, I want to come on and have the best energy. What did I do? I threw on some weights in my gym. I got some sunlight. I was outside, and I'm able to then step into this podcast in a completely different state. State is really our breath, body, posture, all of that. And that's going to carry a very different energy. And when you do that, you're going to carry a different energy throughout the day. But for anybody who struggled to make the change, I'd ask yourself, hey, what benefit are you currently getting right now? Because we stay stuck and not making the change because we're usually still getting some kind of a benefit, right? Even think about someone who's addicted to sugar or pizza or alcohol. There's an immediate benefit, even though there is some kind of a pain there involved. So change happens when we start to associate the change with a positive and the lack of change with a massive immediate pain. And that's what really it has to become. That can take time. Now, a lot of the clients I've worked with, it starts off a little bit hard at first, right? It's, oh my gosh, I haven't seen the change yet. I'm getting up earlier. And it's all of those kind of thoughts come up. But I believe when we can stick to it for a period of time, we start to reap those rewards and we start to then notice those benefits. Wow, I'm feeling better. I have more energy. My productivity is better. I'm more confident in myself. And I've had so many clients who've been like, holy shit, I didn't know what it felt like to feel this good. I didn't even realize it felt so bad before, but hell no, is there any way that I'm ever going back to again? Immediate
Not the best
pleasure.
feeling ever as a coach.
Right?
Like just to see that, to feel that for your clients.
Yeah, and it's so possible for everybody. And that's, yeah, exactly what we want for everybody, to get to that point of like, I could never go back. I could never go back to where I was and, what I was doing there before, because it feels so good to feel good.
Feels so good to feel good. Yes. What would you do if, like, how does it work as a client? So one of the things I love to do on the podcast is I will, in the show notes, have every link of every offer of everything that you do. So, like, let's just say someone's listening. They're like, oh my gosh, like I felt so bad for so long and I would love to have Rachel's help. Like, they're going to follow a link, but what would it look like to become a client of yours?
Yeah, so we actually offer a free 30-minute call to everybody. And the intention of that call is to really get to know the person, their goals, their background, their history, and just make sure it's a good fit. We're very hands-on with our approach. So it's coaching, it's accountability, it's all of the functional medicine lab testing to look at what could be off in the body, because that is important information. We need to see, hey, are there things off with your gut microbiome? Are there hormone imbalances? Mamas are very core, especially post-pregnancy, postpartum, to have those hormone imbalances. Is the thyroid off? Women are also very prone to having thyroid disorders, a lot more than men. Are we deficient in anything? Is there inflammation? Is there insulin resistance? Those are all questions we want to answer, because, I can prescribe, a perfect workout plan and diet, but if there are some things that are off, we need to have the roadmap in order to get you back to overall health. So
what do those tests look like, Rachel? I'm not familiar with that type of testing. What does that look like? Is it blood? Is it pee? Like, what do we do?
It's all of it. All of it. So, yeah, blood, urine, stool, and even saliva. So this is functional medicine testing. It's very different. You can't go to your normal Western medicine doctor and say, hey, order me a gut microbiome test. They're going to be like, you don't do that. So we're looking at how your body's metabolizing your hormones. We're looking at, the bacteria in your gut. And, really at the core, we start with getting you going with some different healing protocols, addressing the gut first and foremost, because kind of like I spoke about earlier, all disease begins and ends in the gut. Now, there are so many things that can cause the gut to become off. I've already mentioned a few, right? So stress, whether it's physical or emotional. Our gut and our brain are very interconnected. Actually, 90% of our body's serotonin, our feel-good hormone, is produced from that bacteria residing in our gut. Also, the bacteria in our gut play a role in how we're metabolizing our hormones, in our thyroid, in our body's immune system, inflammation, metabolism. So that's why very often when we get the gut right, we start to see a lot of other things fall into place. We start to see, better cholesterol levels, weight loss, skin improve. We start to see depression, anxiety get better, so better mood. We literally start to see all of these symptoms improve just by working on the gut, but also identifying what caused the gut to be off in the first place.
Okay, diet, so that if we fix it, then it's not going to keep happening again, kind of thing.
Right, exactly. So we need to know what is off, but we need to know why it became off in the first place. The gut can become off from, history of antibiotics, medications, stress. For most people, it's a combination. So it's more so identifying the root causes, plural, because there's usually a multiple root causes that cause that dis-ease in the body.
Yeah. So what, after you do that and you've done the testing, then you work with them to sort of heal those things?
Yeah. So all of my coaches, as well as myself, of course, are certified in functional medicine. So we create a customized plan and protocol through supplements, lifestyle changes, dietary protocols to help restore and heal the body, but also that coaching piece where that coaching is really helping work with the person making some of these changes, and also sometimes identifying even some of those emotional and stress pieces that could be playing a role.
And is that all one-on-one? Is that group? How does that work?
So we have, as a functional medicine option with the testing, all of that would be one-on-one just because it is very customized to each person. However, we do have a group-based option. I'm actually about to launch my second round of my gut health repair program, which doesn't include all of the testing, but it's a fraction of the cost because one-on-one testing is a bit more of an investment always because you're getting that super customized approach. But with the gut health repair program, as I kind of mentioned earlier, we get to really work on healing and optimize our gut health, which very often improves all these other different systems in the body. And I also really dive into the fitness component. I dive into muscle mass and why that's important. So when we can heal our gut, optimize our muscle through nutrition and training, that's where I think we can really get to a good place of health. Some people do great with group-based. Some people need the one-on-one and all of the testing.
I love that. So tell me about the role of stress and trauma on the gut and overall health and essentially success, right? Because that's what we're talking about, right? Like, I believe, like you, that this is like where we start, right? Like, we can't be successful in our businesses or add on new businesses when we're tired and exhausted and depressed, right? Like, it doesn't work like that. And this is like where we start. So if someone's listening and they're like, I really would love to be able to start here, do some of this work. I can't afford coaching. I don't want to do coaching. I'm going to tell them to do what? Go to your podcast.
Yeah.
There's so much good information on there.
Yeah. So podcast, ton of free information. My blog has a ton of free information, and I can definitely give everybody some different kind of tips on things to get started with. And a lot of it has to do with working on our gut health ultimately, because our gut and our brain are in bi-directional communication through something called the vagus nerve, which the vagus nerve is our largest nerve in the body. It extends from our gut all the way up through our heart, all the way to our brain, and then it intersects to all of these other different, organs and areas in the body. And really, our brain communicates with our gut. So when we have chronic stress or unaddressed trauma, that's where that can be part of the root cause in developing gut imbalances, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, people even with autoimmune conditions. Ultimately, there's that brain connection there. But if our gut is also off, let's just say from poor diet, this could be from foodborne illness, food sensitivities, past medications, all of these can actually just more so directly affect the gut. That's going to also affect our mental health too, through that bidirectional communication in the gut and the brain. So I'll start a bit first on the stress side and how stress and trauma can really impact our gut. And one of the ways is really through that shutdown of the vagus nerve. So when we're in a state of chronic stress or trauma, essentially our digestion shuts down and that vagus nerve almost becomes what I call inactive. And when that happens, we're essentially preparing for like that fight or flight type reaction. So let's just say someone cuts you off in traffic or something like that. Like your body goes into fight or flight response. However, that's an acute stressor. That's not bad. We can say like workouts, right? Like your body goes into a stress response during that phase. Acute stress is good, not a problem. We all experience it. We all have days where our children piss us off. Someone cuts us off in traffic. We have something come up and hurt. That's not really what I'm talking about because we can never avoid stress. What I'm talking about is chronic stress. This is the person who's in a toxic relationship, no work-life balance, Or, right, that trauma piece, because the mind doesn't really know the difference between stress currently and stress previously. And when we have trauma that's unaddressed, we have what I call a hypervigilant nervous system, where our stress threshold is actually a lot smaller, meaning where small things, right, that maybe wouldn't normally stress out the average person really sends that person over into that chronic stress type response. So it could be perceived stress from the brain, or it could be actual stress, in our current life with work or relationships. But really what at the core is happening, our digestive system completely shuts down. This causes an increase in inflammation in our gut. And to go along with that, our body releases a lot of hormones like cortisol, adrenaline. Now, cortisol is a hormone that is very catabolic. And catabolic is a fancy word, meaning it breaks things down. So when in bodybuilding, like we avoid cortisol like the hawk because we don't want cortisol to break our muscles down. But our gut lining is also a muscle tissue. So this chronically high cortisol, our digestion shutting down, what this can actually lead to is, one, constipation, because, right, we're not digesting our food. Bacteria can begin to overgrow in the gut. But that cortisol that breaks muscle tissue down can over time begin to break down that gut lining, leading to what we call intestinal permeability or leaky gut. And that's where we get that bacteria, food, and toxins getting into our bloodstream, triggering a massive inflammatory and immune response systemically throughout the body. But they've also shown in studies that a leaky gut contributes to a leaky brain, where now we also get a breach in our blood-brain barrier, where we're getting now also toxins and the things leaking into our brain, causing inflammation of the brain. All of that due to chronic stress and unaddressed trauma in the body. And that's where we can actually start.
I want to pause just for a second, because I feel like what you said is like so important, and everybody needs to just like pause for a second and listen, because isn't that just the reason why I love how you share a lot about like the sick diet, the Western, like the way that we eat and the way that we are. And so what you just said there, the chronic stress that a lot of people are under right now, right? Like there is, yes, the hypervigilant, the smaller, the traffic, whatever, like small things. But a lot of Americans are under a lot of stress right now, whether it's finance, whether it's COVID, whatever it is, there's just been a lot. And so it's easy to understand why everybody seems, or a lot of people seem pissed off or depressed.
Yeah, 100%. And why they have all these health issues to go along with it. Because that's where our gut actually starts to become imbalanced. Autoimmune conditions can develop. But also when people are stressed, what do they typically turn to? To numb.
Yeah.
Food, alcohol, everything else that then further causes the disruption in our gut health ultimately. So that can be a big way of leading to disease in the body, but also our gut can cause mental health issues, anxiety, depression, and brain fog, and even neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's and dementia have been associated also with poor gut health. Wow. And how this really happens is that bacteria in our gut are playing such a big role in the communication and all of the other systems in our body ultimately. And the bacteria produce, as I mentioned earlier, serotonin. And that serotonin essentially stimulates that vagus nerve that's produced from good bacteria in our gut. And that vagus nerve connects all the way to our brain ultimately. So when we have inflammation in our gut from poor diet, we have a toxic gut, we have intestinal permeability. We already talked about how that can lead to like neuroinflammation, but we also didn't get to produce things like serotonin, which is the main thing that a lot of SSRIs or antidepressants really aim to act on. They act on, that reuptake of serotonin into the brain. And that's where actually psychobiotics, it's a new form of therapy that's been introduced recently, which is a type of good bacteria being introduced into the gut, has been shown to work as good, if not better, than a lot of the traditional antidepressants overall.
I remember when my son was really sick and, he had stage 4 cancer. It was a very stressful time. I gave birth to twins at the same time as he was diagnosed. And they were like, okay, everyone and their brother was like, all right, you have to go see a doctor, Melissa, because you're going to have to get some sort of antidepressant, to help you through this. And it just sort of reminds me about what you talked about in the beginning, that like, if you don't get to the root cause of it, and figure out what's going on or why you're there, like that was just going to mask it. And so for me, personally, I chose not to go on any form of it because I knew like it was either like I was going to deal with it then when he was diagnosed and deal with the stress of it, or I was going to deal with it in 5 years' time, whichever one I wanted to choose. And so it's like learning to deal with that. And I was not eating healthy at the time. So I was the one that was like eating the McDonald's and drinking the Diet Cokes. I wasn't on SSRs, but I was eating horribly. And I ultimately ended up having to deal with all that later, which thankfully now, I don't drink soda and I don't eat McDonald's and, I've moved away from those things. But a massive part of when people are going through stress, I feel like it is so commonly suggested or used. And I will tell you, Rachel, I grew up in Scotland and it's like not a thing there. Like I don't know anybody that's on antidepressants in Scotland. Like I never knew. My mom lost a child. My aunt lost a child. It's just not a thing. But here in America, I think, what is it, the number? Like 95% of the world's like prescriptions or something like that are like all used in the States. Like it's like a crazy number.
It is an insane number. And, the United States is also one of the only few, countries that also has medications as like on commercials. Like that's not allowed actually in a lot of countries. You don't see like, hey, go ask your doctor about getting on Cymbalta or whatever it may be. Like we're one of the few countries, but it's a business and we have a food industry that pays no attention to health, and we have a health industry that pays no attention to food ultimately. And then we diagnose based off of symptom clusters. And what that means is you go to the doctor and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm sad all the time. I just feel so down and low. They're like, it seems like based off of your symptoms, you have depression. And you're like, oh, yes, I have depression. Well, here's the medication. Well, there are, hundreds of different reasons why you could be depressed. And there are actually, the forms of depression where it makes sense, right? Like there's a death. My dog died like a week ago and I went through like a mini little depression, and that was a normal human response, but then there also are things that can be off. Like you can have low progesterone. For women, especially mamas postpartum who deal with depression, their progesterone drops. And that progesterone actually acts on GABA pathways in the brain, which is essential for overall mood and sleep. There can be inflammation. And when there's inflammation in the body, there's neuroinflammation. And that can be coming from diet. That can be coming from stress. There can be bacteria imbalances and poor gut health. There can be toxins in the body that are crossing through our blood-brain barrier, causing neuroinflammation. I mean, I could go on and on and on about some of the functional root causes for depression and anxiety, but it's not good enough to go to the doctor and just say, I have depression, here's a medication, to treat that. And I hope everybody hears my heart when I say this. I'm not against taking the pill. I'm totally not against taking the pill. There are some instances where I'm like, take the pill, do what you got to do to get back on your feet. Yeah. So then we can search a little bit further. But what I am saying is I'm against taking the pill is the sole fix. We can sometimes utilize medication in ways to bring ourselves to a certain point so we can do the work that we need to do. Totally fine with that. Medicine serves us in so many ways, but what we can't do is say this medication is doing all the work for me and going to fix everything, because what caused the body to be off in the first place, diet, whether the hormones are off, chronic stress, those are still there and going to cause other issues in the body. It's not just about the brain. It's not just about that area. It's that stressor that is going to cause other things to be off along with it.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen, antidepressants be lifesavers for people 100%. It's just interesting in America how it's offered as just always like the first solution, right? Like it's just, and what you're saying is it can be a part of it sometimes. It doesn't always have to be. And also it should never be the sole solution.
The sole solution. That's exactly correct. Yes. Yeah. So I think a couple of things people can start doing, and I hope this is okay, but working on gut health, since I am the gut health expert, that's the best place we can always start with. Get your gut right. The mind will follow. Everything else will follow. Heal your gut, heal your life. Ultimately, the first thing is, of course, what we're putting into our body, which is the food we eat, along with stress. We talked a little bit about that. But food is something I feel like a lot of us can do immediately and now and take action on, where sometimes stress and things like we need to kind of get something sorted out ultimately in our life, right? So the food we put into our body, the type of protein, the type of fats, and the type of carbohydrates. I'd love to dive into those three. So protein is super essential because protein is the building blocks to muscles. Protein has amino acids that help produce neurotransmitters in the brain, like serotonin, dopamine, but it's also essential for supporting our gut lining and overall health. So the type of protein matters. It's not just get in protein. We want to aim for real whole food as much as possible. So this is grass-fed.
What does whole food actually mean? I feel like it's an American term and I use it and I feel like I understand it. And I think of it as in just like the food in its simplest, plainest form. Is that correct?
Yeah. So whole food is one ingredient. So an orange is an orange.
Okay.
And chicken is chicken. Right? But what are chips? Right? You could go through the whole list of all the ingredients.
There's quite a few ingredients.
Right? So whole food is just unprocessed, unrefined, ideally organic to go along with it. So for animals, it's food, or it's animals that are fed their natural diet. So grass-fed and finished, not fed a bunch of grains. Fish that is wild caught, and that's going to be the highest quality protein in terms of not only amino acids, but the fats that are in that type of protein. And then, with fats too, right? There's the processed fats, which fats, when we tried to make all of these man-made fats, the trans fats, that was like the worst thing ever for our health. But the fats we really want to aim for are going to be the anti-inflammatory fats. So I call these the mono and the polyunsaturates. So the monos, these are going to be like your avocado. So getting in those good healthy fats like
I just
avocado.
want to eat them all day long, but I know I shouldn't, but they're just the best. I just love them so much.
Yeah. This could be olive oils, nuts and seeds, but again, non-processed, like whole and raw ultimately. And then polyunsaturated fats are the fats that are full of those omega-3 fatty acids, typically found in fatty cuts of fish. And most Americans are very deficient in omega-3s. And omega-3s are one of the very few fats that actually can cross through our blood-brain barrier. And I mentioned the blood-brain barrier a couple times, but think of it kind of like this high security system. Like it would be like the bouncers at the club, essentially. And the bouncers are like, hey, you can't come in. And it only lets in, certain things into the brain. Well, omega-3s are like that VIP who gets to go to the front of the line and get right into the brain there. So our brain loves omega-3s. And there's actually a lot of studies that show that deficiencies in omega-3 fatty acids lead to depression, mental health issues, but also a shrinkage of our hippocampus, which our hippocampus plays the biggest role in memory and cognitive function. So this is where omega-3s ultimately, if they're low, can over time lead to dementia and Alzheimer's quite a bit too. So got to get in your omega-3s. The brain loves it, but also.
So do you usually do a supplement or just eat the whole foods and you'll get it?
So with omega-3s, you can get it from food, but I think most people aren't getting it enough from food. Okay. So typically fatty cuts of fish, salmon, mackerel. This can be caviar if you want to be fancy. Little baby shrimp. Shrimps can be great too as a source of omega-3s, but most people just aren't eating a whole lot of seafood, so they're not getting a lot of omega-3s. So that's where an omega-3 fatty acid supplement is beneficial. I run omega-3 index, which is testing omega-3 levels on all my clients, and I'd say 9 out of 10 people are deficient in it. Wow. And it's actually the levels of omega-3s in their brain. So most people need to be on an omega-3 supplement and working on getting it in through food sources. Now you can get it in through vegan sources like chia seeds and walnuts. However, side note, you would literally have to be beer bonging chia seeds and walnuts in order to get enough of those omega-3 fatty acids. So they're a source. They're just not a very dense source, and you'd be getting a ton of calories and probably gaining weight because they're very calorie dense in order to get enough that your body needs.
Okay.
So good proteins, good fats. And then the next is the type of carbohydrates, and the bacteria in our gut love carbohydrates. I always give the analogy, if you can think how bread is made with yeast and we give it sugar, what does that yeast do? It eats that sugar and the bread rises through a fermentation process. That's actually what happens in our gut. One, when our gut's really off and we have too much bacteria, we call that bacteria dysbiosis. That's the person who's looking 6 months pregnant every day because of how much gas is being produced and fermented from the bacteria. But there's also a good fermentation process from our gut bugs. And there's 2 types of carbohydrates that are really, really good for promoting overall gut health. One is insoluble fiber. So insoluble fiber is an indigestible carbohydrate, meaning that we don't break it down. There's no calories with it. But the bacteria in our gut love it. The bacteria break it down. So some sources of insoluble fiber are all the leafy greens. You know, you may have heard the statement before, like, eat the rainbow, but I say, like, be like Hermit the Crab. You know, eat as much greens as possible. All the leafy greens, arugula, spinach, all of those are great cruciferous vegetables. So cruciferous vegetables are also great for female hormones, but great for gut health. Broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, bok choy, artichokes. Yeah. So all of those insoluble fibers are great, feeding the good gut bugs in our body. And then the second is something called a resistant starch. Okay. Now, a resistant starch resists digestion. So very similar to insoluble fiber. It's not broken down and utilized as calories. Instead, it's broken down by our good gut bugs. So this is actually green bananas. So if you've ever eaten a green banana and you've been like, oh, this is not as sweet, it's a bit more starchy. So green bananas have resistant starch. Cooked in cooled rice or potatoes. So this is sort of interesting. There's less calories in rice and potatoes that have been cooked and then put in the refrigerator and cooled, because some of the bonds in that starch change into a resistant starch, which become a prebiotic fiber for the bacteria in our gut.
So it's easy things to make and batch on a Sunday, put away, and then you have it for the week.
Yeah, you could make like an avocado potato salad. You could make some different stuff there. I eat a lot of my food cold. Not saying that there's like always benefits to all foods cold, but I eat a lot of salads in my food cold. Yeah. And green banana flour, raw potato starch. I have a lot of my clients just take a teaspoon of each and just throw it in like a protein shake or something to get some of that resistant starch. And when we're eating these resistant starches, essentially what is happening is we're producing a type of a fat in our body called short chain fatty acids. Now, short chain fatty acids are actually super protective for our gut, but also great for our mental health too. So they actually help maintain the integrity of our gut lining. They've been shown to play a positive impact in the brain function and having good vagal nerve activity or high vagal tone. So when we eat a lot of these prebiotics, insoluble fiber or resistant starches, we feed our good gut bugs. We have good bacteria in the gut that, is great for mental health because that produces serotonin. And they produce these short chain fatty acids that further help protect our gut and, of course, our mental health there too. So getting in our prebiotics. Number 2 can be probiotics. So probiotics are actually the bacteria that we, of course, want to take in either through supplementation or food. So food sources can be sauerkraut. I love sauerkraut. If you actually follow me on social media, I eat a beet sauerkraut every single day for either breakfast or lunch. It's great with eggs, actually. It's bright colored, like purple. Beautiful. Or I have it on my salad with all my greens and my arugula, my artichokes, and all my fats like avocado and olive oil, my proteins on there. So sauerkraut, kimchi, miso. Some people do okay if they tolerate dairy with like a fermented yogurt. But you can always do like a coconut yogurt too if you don't tolerate dairy very well. And then the other option is supplementation just as well. So there's the probiotic foods that we can get, but there's also the probiotic supplements. And there's really kind of 3 different types of probiotics we can take. There's the normal lactobacillus and bifidobacterium strains. That's what I think most people take. Great for our overall gut health. And then there's soil-based probiotics, and then there's yeast-based probiotics. So ultimately, getting on a good probiotic is also key for gut health.
Oh my gosh, you've given us like so much good stuff. I've taken so many notes. I'm going to make so many carousels and tag you because they're all amazing. Like so many tidbits and so much good information for everyone to get started. And you're on social media a lot. Where can everybody follow you? I'm going to put all the tags, but what's your, give us a couple little pieces where people can follow you.
Yeah, I have 2 Instagrams. I have at Rachel Scheer, which is my personal page. And then I have my practice, which is at Rachel Scheer Nutrition. That's where I like really nerd out on all the functional medicine and gut stuff there. So you can follow me.
It's amazing. Yeah, follow both of them. They're both wonderful. And your podcast.
Yes. And my podcast is Sheer Madness Podcast.
The best name. I love it. It's so good. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I will make sure that everybody gets all of the good information to follow when does your program start?
So I'm actually doing a Black Friday sale. So on Black Friday, it's opening up for signups, and then it'll be available for 1 to 2 weeks. Kind of depends on how many people jump in there because I'm capping it at around 50 people to sign up for the Gut Health Repair Program, which will start the first Wednesday in December.
Yay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. You're incredible and your brain is amazing. And I could just like sit and talk to you all day. It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an honor.